Hey, this is LOA Today, the Law of Attraction show. Welcome to LOA Today. My name is Walt. It is Friday, November 23rd, 2012. With me today, Debbianne DeRose, author of What I Did on My Midlife Crisis Vacation, and currently working on a second work that we'll go into perhaps for a few minutes here. But from her website, Debbianne she specializes in honest, humorous explorations of all things woo-woo. Now there's a term for you, woo-woo. We'll have to go into that one too. That is metaphysical, spiritual, paranormal, and new agey with intent to empower and entertain. She was formally trained in the conservative arts of engineering and economics and enjoyed stints as a database geek, college instructor, non-profiteer, bricolage artist, and inadvertent house flipper before diving into the world of wordsmithery. And she lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. Debbianne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Walt.
I'm glad to have you here. Tell us about woo-woo. Where does woo-woo come from?
Well, it's sort of a term that I use with faux disdain, but I think it was derived from the Chinese word wu, W-U, as in the dancing wu-li masters. But I don't know, in these parts out in the West Coast, it's sort of a common term for anything that's new agey or paranormal, spiritual, mystical, all of the above.
Okay, well, it's a new one on me, but then again, I live on the East Coast, so that would probably explain it. But
yeah, there's cultural differences.
Same country, right? Last I checked, anyway. So, about your book, What I Did on My Midlife Crisis Vacation. How did that come about, and what did you do on your midlife crisis vacation?
What didn't I do? All things woo-woo. It just sort of evolved organically. I was having kind of a classic midlife crisis. Well, not classic in the way of, red sports cars, but in the case of discontent. But mine in particular took on the woo-woo flavor. It led me to explore all kinds of energy healing and metaphysics, a lot of different workshops, traveling around and experimenting, spoon bending,
Wow.
And so I was writing a blog and I was getting really good response, so I decided to put it into an entire memoir, and it's getting really great response from it because it's fun to read. It's like armchair woo-woo adventures for others,
And you seem to have taken kind of a scientific approach to your exploration of woo-woo, of paranormal and so on and so forth. How did you come to that viewpoint that you wanted to come at it that way? Because most people don't really come at it that way.
Well, I don't know how scientific it is, but I just can't help, being an engineer. I guess you're always an engineer. You're recovering from it, but so there's there's skepticism that's healthy, and it's a mix of open-mindedness and skepticism, which for me just works. I'm just looking at it like, what's real here? I'm sorting out the wheat from the chaff and having a lot of fun with it. There's a lot of humor in it. And I think there's no need to just swallow anything that anyone says if it doesn't resonate with you. It's critical thinking is a beautiful thing.
Oh, it definitely is. I would agree with you. In fact, it's one of the motivations that Louise and I had in terms of creating this program in the first place, because so much of what gets said and acted on and believed out there in the woo-woo world, or what we would call the law of attraction world, is rather woo-woo-y.
I think you have a favorite new word now.
Well, it's certainly the word of the day. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, No, go ahead.
I have my blog is entitled Pitching the Woo, as is my Twitter name, and it's a double entendre because in some ways I'm pitching it as in advocating, and in other ways I'm throwing it,
Okay.
It depends. It's case by case, sentence by sentence, really.
Well, that's reasonable, though. Now, you had some early experiences with what you call on your website taming the wild mind, and I was wondering if you could just take a couple moments to talk about what those experiences were and what influence they may have had on your development along these lines.
Well, that article in particular was about remote viewing training, which was very interesting because it's the least woo-woo of all the woo-woo things I've encountered. It's basically, becoming aware of your thoughts, separating from them so you can observe them objectively. And it's a process, I've been in the process of getting there, and I'm always, you're never really done, but that particular methodology is really helpful because it's structured in a way that allows for that. You recognize the games, the tricks that your ego intellect can play, and then you have a way of setting them aside and acknowledging them rather than sweeping them under the rug. So that's one way of doing it.
Now, talk a little bit more about that. Because basically what you're talking about is what some people might call your common sense skepticism and so forth. How exactly did you incorporate that into your thought process as you were developing, and how much influence did it have?
Well, this is such a broad topic. Let me just speak about the remote viewing for a moment.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's a particular focus. So in remote viewing, you're practicing identifying photos that you haven't seen. So there's a photo that someone has, and your job is to describe it without seeing it. So you're developing your psychic capacities. So you're going to get information. You're going to get thoughts that come to you. You might ask questions that cue information, like what color, what sound, what does it feel like, things like that. So when you get answers, some of them are made up by your conscious mind. And that's kind of a fear that we all have with psychic things. We might go to a psychic reader, but we go, she's making this up,
Sure.
So what's the difference, So, excuse me. So with this process, I started noticing the difference between thoughts that kind of get planted by what I call higher mind. You might call your intuition or your subconscious. I don't know. It depends on how you look at it, what vocabulary you prefer, but there's a distinct difference that you can start to notice. You can start to feel when it's true information that comes in. It tends to come in really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you're dealing with that information coming in quickly, among other things, like you say, you're trying to separate out what's the conscious mind just kind of imposing upon you, and to what extent am I actually tapping into something? And what did you find? What kinds of results did you end up with when you were, when all was said and done, I should say?
Well, the information that comes lightning fast from intuition or higher mind is more accurate, and you can track it. And in a broader sense, this remote viewing is sort of a microcosm of life, right? Because we get information, we get these gut feelings about things, and that's sort of the true information from our true self. But then the ego mind interferes with that because it's kind of, emotionally broken from childhood sometimes or something, So we make up stories and we get confused about what's what. But once you get into the habit of training and kind of getting used to listening to intuition, then you can notice the difference and it becomes second nature. It's just learning a new system.
Mm-hmm. And how do I ask this question? How accurate did you find your abilities became as you went through that testing process? It's sort of a mixed bag. I haven't practiced a lot with remote viewing, but as far as I got in the process, I had some really cool results, Such as? Give us a taste.
Oh, just, it's still, you're just looking at photos, so it's not like at the masterful stage where people can identify the entire scene and the location, like the people who solve missing persons mysteries, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Because I guess I'm not really motivated to do that. I was just sort of dabbling, but
sure.
In a sense, like a lot of my descriptors were accurate once the photo was shown to us. So, I would ask a question, what does it sound like? And I got crashing, and my logical brain is thinking symbols, like musical symbols. And then when the picture was up, it was a wave with a surfer. So that's really relevant, crashing, but I wouldn't have guessed that with my conscious mind.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And then you're also working on a new, is it a novel? Is it a nonfiction book? I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it sounds like it's a nonfiction book, and it sounds like it's derived from your real life.
That is correct. Yeah, I write nonfiction. It's a quirky book because it's part memoir and part self-help. It's kind of helped, you know.
Okay.
And it's called How I Met the Man of My Dreams, A Guide to Manifesting Yours.
I noticed that the MAN was in capital letters on the cover.
I know, clever, huh? I like to play with words. You know, I don't care if other people think it's corny. I'm having fun. That's the point.
So can you give us like a taste of what's in this book?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm telling my story as in memoir style to inspire the single ladies, because, you know, everybody likes a good love story. Why not?
Sure.
But it's a real love story, and it's remarkable in that I'd been single for many, many, many years. And, you know, I think a lot of women are in this boat too, where they're going, God, is this ever going to happen? I guess I'll just be happy on my own then, you know. But all the while studying the woo-woo, studying the Abraham Hicks philosophy and a lot of other law of attraction teachings. And when it finally happened, I was astounded at how accurate the teachings were. Even though while I was in the process of getting there, I didn't really believe it. But I could have had more fun if I had relaxed into it. So I realized a lot about the manifestation process, and I thought, I need to share this and get the other single ladies hooked up with the men of their dreams.
Can you, excuse me, can you tell us anything about who you manifested?
Well, I manifested this wonderful man named Tony, and he has all the qualities I was looking for, but I didn't really believe that they could exist in one person. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't believe it existed, you know.
Sure, yeah. It's interesting to us. Louise was actually disappointed because she couldn't do this interview with us today, but our own story together is very much in alignment with the topic that you're addressing with your book, because we met when we were in our 40s. Neither of us had ever been married before. Neither of us had actually had any really good, serious relationship that we could point at and say, wow, that was a good, serious relationship. And we were both kind of in the same vein that you described, which is where we were wondering, would it ever happen? Would we ever meet anybody? You know, would we ever find anybody that fits our particular way of being? And we were both very doubtful about that. But I guess the story starts with her in that she had a black cat that was with her for 16 years or so, and that cat passed away in November of 1997. And her friends, of course, knew all about the cat, knew that it was in the last days of its life and so forth. And so when the cat died, they asked her, "Are you going to get another cat?" And she said, "No, I think I'm going to get a husband." Approximately 3 months, over the next 3 or 4 months, she started asking everybody she knew, "Do you know any healthy guys, any healthy single guys who are available?" And she kept getting a lot of no's and a lot of ums and a lot of hms and that kind of thing. Didn't really get anywhere until she talked to a colleague of hers. She, at the time, was working as a therapist for a family service outfit and knew somebody else who was doing the same kind of thing, also working out of the same outfit. Not somebody that she would normally figure that she'd find somebody with. In fact, this person, who's also, of course, one of my friends, is what many people would call very new agey, almost uncomfortably so. She's a wonderful person. She's really, really nice, but I mean, she's just really, really out there. So Louise did not actually expect that Debbie would know somebody that would be appropriate. But she asked Debbie, and I have no idea why, but for whatever reason, immediately Debbie said, "Yeah, I know somebody." Now, to understand my contact with her, I was very much into swing dancing. I lived in Connecticut at the time. We were both in Connecticut, and Debbie was one of my many swing dancing partners, and that's where I knew her. But I didn't know her real well. I mean, I'd been to a few parties that she'd had and so forth, but it's not like we were really close friends. She knew lots of guys from the swing dancing community alone, let alone her new age circles and everything else. Why she thought of me, I have no idea, but she did. And she said, well, yeah, I know somebody. Shall I have him give you a call? And Louise said, well, maybe you might want to ask him first whether he might be interested. And so she did. Deborah gave me a call. And at the time, I was really in a place of depression where relationships were concerned. I just had a non-relationship. I can't call it a relationship. A non-relationship end abruptly that really had not gone anywhere anyway, but it was just really very unpleasant all the way around. And I was not in a place where I really wanted to try again. I'd just gotten burned so many different times. But this was a nice friend. And I said, well, maybe I'll give a call just, to be nice to my friend. I certainly didn't want to put her off. I appreciated the fact that she was, thinking about me and so forth. So I got on the phone with Louise, and we had 2 or 3 phone calls in a row spaced out over the course of about a week between each call. And after the 3rd call, we decided to get together, and we got together, and it was a complete flop. Did not work. But my friend Deborah is, she may be new agey, but she's also very intelligent. And she said, well, did you give it the 3-date rule? I said, what on earth is the 3-date rule? And she says, well, that's where you give it 3 dates before you decide one way or another. I said, oh, God, do I really want to do that? But I did, and as they say, the rest is history. It worked out very well, and we've been together ever since. We got married in '99, and it's been fabulous ever since then. So when I heard about your book and heard about the topic of it, I said, yeah, we know that story pretty well.
I love it. Yeah, the 3-date rule is a good thing. I read Cindy Lou's 4-man plan a month before meeting Tony, and it helped me kind of get my mind straight about that. Like, don't dismiss anyone too quickly kind of attitude. But it goes to show that, you're, as they say with Abraham Hicks, everything's in the vortex. The universe is sort of taking your orders as you go. You don't even have to make a project out of it, make a vision board, because your experiences in having all those disappointments automatically logged your preference for the opposite, So it goes to show that the process works swimmingly if you let it.
I can't say I honestly know how I let it work in my case, because I certainly was not aware of the whole LOA thing. I had never heard of Abraham Hicks. I didn't have any idea about any of that stuff. All I knew was I was just tired. And I think what really happened was, because I was tired, I let go. So,
exactly. Exactly.
I just reached the breaking point, and I said, I'm not going to deal with this anymore, so forget it, go away. And Louise, of course, she was the one who was doing the hunting and seeking and just, refusing to leave a stone unturned. So she was just turning over every stone she could find, looking at all the frogs and seeing what came around. But yeah, it does show. It shows that the whole process really does work. And the fact that you mentioned earlier that Tony met virtually all of your qualifications and your wish list, so to speak. Turned out Louise also had a written wish list that she had done a number of years prior when she was doing her studies leading up to becoming a therapist. She pulled out that list about, 6 months into our relationship and read it over and then handed it to me. Every single item on that list applied to me. It was just amazing to me. I mean, not one miss. So I guess there's another example of how you manifest what you think about, because she thought very carefully about that list, worked it out really carefully, and it happened.
Yeah, I made a lot of different lists. Besides, a lot of people just make a list of the qualities of their prospective partner. But it's also helpful to make a list of your own to kind of focus on what you bring to the table, and then also make lists or even scripting of the relationship, of a dialogue that can happen between you two. And some of that stuff is uncanny when it comes true, and you look at the list and you're like, oh my God, that's, I know a gal who did that, and he was saying the exact things to her in person that she'd written on the list, on the script,
It is amazing. I mean, the more that I first discovered LOA shortly after The Secret came out. And I can't say that the whole concept was foreign to me, because I had already read a lot of the positive thinking books from dating back, 1970s, 1980s, that kind of thing. So I was quite familiar with a lot of the literature. So it wasn't totally new. It was a kind of a different presentation of the whole concept, and that part was new. But the concept itself was about the same as I'd always heard, and I had never had real success with it before. But for some reason, this time around, I wanted to try it better. I wanted to really apply it. I wanted to understand why I had failed before, so forth. So it became a big project for me. Louise actually didn't get into it for the first few years that I was doing it. She actually became interested within the last year or so. But yeah, it's one of those things. You never really know who's going to latch on to what at what time. But in my case, it was LOA starting in 2007 or something like that. Now, when did you first start exploring all this? Was it around 2009 that you actually started, or had you started before that? Because your website says enlightening up since 2009.
Yeah, I just think that's funny, as if it's a business, established. Well, I mean, in the Longview, ever since, who knows, I've been doing woo-woo stuff for centuries, probably in other bodies, but, in
probably
the
the
80s,
topic of a future book to me.
Right, endless topics. In the 80s, I was in high school, and I had this amazing friend who was ahead of her time, and she was really keyed in. And she turned me on to this stuff. She would hand me books from Shakti Gawain and Louise Hay, and she, taught me that your thoughts create your reality. Whoa, and it's easier to accept when you're younger. You don't have a lot of static. You just say, okay, all right, let me try this. Mm-hmm. And that was my history with, at least with manifesting. I did a few of those effortlessly when I was younger and didn't think much of it. But as we get older, we have so much doubt, we have so much baggage that can interfere. So we have to dismantle some of that, kind of release the resistance.
Have you had any particularly fun or interesting manifestation stories that have occurred to you?
Well, here's a fun one. It's not a manifestation, but a general manifestation. It goes to show that when you release resistance, that's when it happens. When I was remodeling houses, I said I was an inadvertent house flipper, which is true, because I bought a house because I wanted to convert it. I wanted it to be my canvas, and I wanted a place to live where landlord wouldn't tell me what to do. So I bought a fixer, and I tore it apart, was rebuilding it. I decided to build a big tile shower, and I had all this crazy mosaic tile art, and I was on a shoestring budget. I collected all these tiles for months and months, and I thought I was all ready, and by the time I used them up, the shower was only half done. I'd miscalculated, and I thought, oh, how am I going to get more tile? They're so expensive, it would take me another year. I don't want to wait another year to finish it. I was kind of frustrated, and I just kind of gave up because I had other fish to fry. I had wires hanging out of the ceiling and whatnot, so I moved on.
One of those projects.
Yeah, so I forgot about it, basically. I moved on. I didn't focus. I didn't obsess over it. And then about a week later, there was a knock on the door, and these two women had pulled up in a pickup truck, and they said, "We're wondering if you would be interested in these tiles. We used to work at Ann Sachs Tile. That's one of the really nice tile places in Portland, Oregon. And we're now liquidating our possessions and moving to Alaska, and we saw you did some mosaic out here in the yard, and maybe you'd like to take a look." They opened the truck, and there were just crates and crates full of these beautiful tiles. And I couldn't believe it. I said, thank you very much. That's a good example of, the universe can provide anything in any way. If we get out of the way, stop thinking we have to figure out how or when.
I can't remember the last time that I had someone stop at my door, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, I've got all these tiles I'm giving away. Would you be interested in any of them?" That's a fairly rare occurrence.
I know. See, and I write these things down on little pieces of paper, and I put them in a glass jar. And if I'm ever feeling kind of doubtful and cynical, I open up the jar and reread them, and I go, "Oh yeah, that's right." I always recommend that to people, because your own proof is the only way that you're going to know that this thing is real.
Yeah, I agree with that very strongly, because truly, if you really try to apply the principles of scientific reasoning and scientific inquiry and so forth, you really can't do it to this kind of stuff. There's no way to do double-blind studies. There's no way to do to apply the basic kinds of scientific approaches to this that you would normally apply in a scientific situation. It just doesn't match up in any way. So, like you say, the only thing you can do is go on your own experience. And in fact, the very first year, shortly after I read The Secret, I actually had a first experience with a manifestation that I attempted to do consciously. Approximately, when was it? I read the book in November of 2007, and in March of that year, I had this little thing that showed up on my knuckle, and I later found out it was a cyst, and it persisted for quite a few months. Didn't seem to go away. I thought it was, some sort of a little injury and that it would go away, but it never did. Come September, I had to go see a doctor about something else, and while I was there, I said, "Hey, doc, could you take a look at this?" And she looked at it, she said, "Oh, it's a cyst." And looked at it carefully, got a magnifier on it. "Yeah, that's definitely a cyst. You're going to want to get that taken care of. Just you can make an appointment with any surgeon. It's an in-office operation. They can do it in probably half an hour or less. It's not a big deal. You definitely want to do it because at some point it's quite possible cysts can become cancerous or can evolve into other kinds of bad situations. So you don't want to just neglect it and let it go. You want to do something about it. But it's probably going to be okay for quite some time, but definitely get it attended to. No big deal, nothing to worry about. Just, get it done." So, being who I am, I left the doctor's office and said, "Well, I don't want to have to deal with that," and I didn't. And forgot about it until I read The Secret a few months later, 2 months later actually, and didn't even think about connecting the two until January, at which point I said, "Hey, wait a minute, I've been trying to get my head around this whole manifesting thing. I wonder if I can manifest getting rid of a cyst on my finger." Sounded like a good test to me. So I said, "All right, well, we'll give that a try." So I concentrated so hard. I was working on that finger, and I was putting all of my mental energy into getting rid of that cyst. And you know what? It didn't go away. It just stayed there. It stayed there for days at a time, weeks at a time. It just wouldn't go anywhere. And then I read something that said, well, what you want to do is you don't want to be focusing on the thing that you want to get rid of, because that'll just keep bringing you more of the thing. What you want to do,
right.
you want to be thinking about what it's like to not have the thing. Well, I have a cyst on my finger. What am I supposed to do? Pretend there's no cyst there? How on earth am I supposed to do that? And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. I got another pinky finger on my other hand, and it doesn't have a cyst on it. So I started focusing on that pinky and said, this is just the way my left pinky looks. It has no cyst on it. It's perfectly clean. It's just a regular knuckle. It's got little folds of skin and so forth, and it's a completely healthy finger. And I did that for about 10 minutes or so, and then I forgot about it. Till about 3 weeks later, and I said, oh, my cyst. And I looked at my left finger, and it was gone.
Wow. I love it. That's a great story.
So that's the first time I said, you know what, this stuff may work.
Yeah. Intention is powerful. Yeah, thoughts are powerful. And actually, if you think, I had a similar story in my book, the Midlife Crisis Vacation book, about I had an ovarian cyst. Oh. And it was kind of a big, scary deal for a while there. And then I realized all this, like what you just described. And in the end, I realized that it was the cyst came to assist me in realizing some stuff. And
boy, that wordplay again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it assists you in your case, in showing you how powerful you are.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I presume that you brought that up because you successfully got rid of the ovarian cyst. Yeah,
however it happens, and I studied matrix energetics, which is a really fun, trippy thing. And the way they talk, the language that they speak is like, well, you just enter a different reality where the cyst isn't there. Simple. Like we have infinite parallel realities to choose from in any fraction of a second. We're constantly choosing, shifting reality. So simply choose one that's different, that's more in alignment with what you prefer.
Now, what kind of a total time frame are we talking about here?
Well, for me, it was a long time. It was like 2 years because of all the stuff that I had to learn around it, the emotional stuff that had built up. It was a lot of processing. But I think the key is like not to freak out, because everything has a purpose and everything can be fine, and you can get everything that you want, health, relationship, money, whatever, if you believe it and relax. And even if you don't believe it, you have to just not actively disbelieve. Just like you have to no longer focus on the cyst, you focus elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. In fact,
because
go ahead.
Oh, because there is no law of repulsion. If you're saying cyst, go away, you're just saying cyst, cyst, cyst.
There's no law of repulsion. I like that. Okay, so oh dear, let me just put this out of the way here. So on the topic of your upcoming book, the one that you're still working on, How I Met the Man of My Dreams, can you give us any particularly interesting insights from that book?
Well, I think it's very practical and it's humorous. So I'm really looking in detail at real life scenarios that happen with women. The things we tell ourselves and how we get in our own way. So I think it's going to be very practical for the person who earnestly wants to make it happen. The thing is, with manifesting in LOA, I'm hearing an echo. Are you hearing that?
Sorry, that's me playing with settings here. Is that gone now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So that's okay. It seems like The Secret was sort of a fad for some people, like so many bread machines that got donated to Goodwill afterward, Mm-hmm. And so I'm really curious about why it is that some people take the bull by the horns and some don't. So I'm looking at it from a psychological point of view, like what happens when you set out with, say, New Year's intentions with all this energy and then it fizzles. So I'm looking at very practical ways to deal with that and stay on course.
What do you think is the number one factor in terms of successfully dealing with something like that?
Well, I think the number one form of resistance is just doubt, because you don't really, you want to believe that the law of attraction is real, but you're not really sure a lot of the time. And you may believe, but you may not know it at your core. There's a difference between knowing and belief.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the absence of belief, what you can do is strike an agreement with your logical brain that says, okay, I'm going to conduct an experiment for a certain time period, let's say a month, and during that time I'm going to suspend disbelief. I'm going to act as if this absolutely is real, and everything I do is going to come back to that. I'm not going to allow myself to deviate. So you can kind of allow your skepticism to breathe without feeding it.
I have to admit, I've always had trouble with the act as if. I mean, I've done it at times, sometimes with success, but a lot of the time, my disbelief actually gets worse when I try to do that. So for me, that's not been the way to do it. But I know that a lot of people advocate it. I know a lot of people say, yeah, that's the way to do it when you're having doubt. For me, it's never worked.
Well, I'm not saying act as if in the grand sense of act as if you already have the thing you want. I'm saying act as if you've agreed to the premise that your thoughts are powerful. And so when you catch yourself going, it doesn't really matter. Does it really matter if I get negative about this thing just this once? Or, you refer back to your agreement. Maybe you sign it and post it on the wall. Okay, I agreed to do this. I'm just going to play along.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sort of just coaxing your ego into cooperating until you start seeing results. And results are what fuels you. That's why I'm writing the book. The initial motivation for writing it was for myself, because I was so amazed at this manifestation that I wanted to remember how it works for myself, for other areas in my life that I'm manifesting stuff in,
Which is very cool.
So the thing about manifesting is that a lot of people treat it like a project.
Mm-hmm.
I joke about a manifestation, but it's just an ongoing thing. It's 24/7. You can't turn it off. It's a change of lifestyle. It's a different way of thinking and training yourself to think.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just relegate it to the project and say, okay, I'm going to have this is my meditation time. I'm going to visualize and then go out into the world and have all kinds of negative resistant thoughts, because it doesn't work that way. And then people do that and then they conclude that it doesn't work.
Yeah,
but they're not really applying it.
Yeah, that's always the difficult part, trying to recognize and then to deal with the fact that You do this one kind of manifestation attempt, and then you spend the rest of your time doing the opposite without realizing it. And then as you become more and more aware of it, I found that I actually get frustrated at times, like, oh my God, there it is, I'm doing it again. Why do I keep doing that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and everybody goes through this, and the key is, first of all, to accept. You don't give yourself a hard time like that. You don't say, damn it, I should be further along in this process. I know better, because the intellectual knowing is one thing, but the emotional change, you're actually rewiring your brain. You know,
right.
You're kind of reinforcing brand new thought pathways, and it takes time. It takes a lot. It's an ongoing thing. So you don't give yourself a hard time to say, okay, that's fine. And you go with small baby steps. You get a foot in the door and you go, okay, this is a slight change. That's all that's needed, you know, and it sort of daisy chains off from there. You just relax and you go, okay, I'm good, you know.
Mm-hmm, yep. No, I think of it in terms of starting out like a 98-pound weakling who goes into the gym, and each day he goes into the gym, he's trying to build up the muscle a little bit. So I call it my LOA muscle, and I keep trying to build up the muscle.
Nice. That's perfect. But you have to have the wherewithal to continue. You have to, you know, that's the key. So if you strike an agreement with yourself in the beginning, okay, I'm conducting an experiment for a month, you know, if you got to apply willpower. You don't have to muscle through it, but you have to know that you're doing something deliberate. It's not just reading a book and putting it down and going about your old ways of being.
Right. Oh, yeah. There definitely has to be some kind of concerted effort on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, you're right. You're not going to notice any kind of manifestation. Although we do manifest things all the time. We just don't necessarily notice them.
That's right. That's right. Every moment is a manifestation.
Yep.
And the interesting thing is, it's all, what we get is all based on our belief systems. So I go into that in my book too, like excavating your belief systems. Because a lot of times we feel stuck, you know, we reinforce those old thought pathways over and over, and we kind of feel powerless. We're like, well, I know better, but I just keep slipping back into it. You know, what is that? You know, and there's a reason for that. You know, so, and there's a way to deal with that. There's many ways.
Yeah, I think that in my own case, what happens is I can get myself going more by looking at what happens in other people's lives than by trying to will myself. I mean, sometimes I can will myself, but not most of the time. Most of the time, it's about looking at what other people are like. You mentioned, what their thought process is, what their philosophy is, that kind of thing. And you can actually see it. You can see that certain kinds of people with certain kinds of philosophy, certain kinds of perhaps religious beliefs or wherever else, they end up having certain kinds of lives. There's a definite patterning that goes on there. That, for me, is where it makes it easier to understand that this stuff really does happen all the time, regardless of whether one is conscious about it.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah, the teachers are all around.
Yeah. It's just a question of becoming aware of it and being willing to look for it. Getting the skepticism out of the way and saying, okay, let's give this a chance. Is this really going on out there? One of the, I guess, the more amusing examples I can think of is people and their pets. Because for years, for decades, generations perhaps, people have noticed how other people who have pets look very much like their pets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. They really do very, very often. Not all the time, but often enough that you say, wow, there's something going on there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can explain that perhaps a thousand different ways. To me, that says, yeah, maybe there is something going on there that is an LOA-related thing. Maybe they are manifesting certain characteristics of themselves through their pets. Quite possible.
Yeah. And then sometimes I wonder, how much of life is really scripted? Is there a master plan? We just think we have free will, attracting things at will. Maybe we're just going along with the plan. It's impossible to know. That's the great mystery, right?
Which way are you leaning on your mystery right now?
Oh, I'm always straddling the two, because I think there's I conceive of it as kind of higher mind and physical mind, because I'm a big fan of Bashar, which is channeled by Daryl Anka, and he talks about this construct, and it really resonates with me, that you have a non-physical component that can see much farther, it's like on the mountaintop, and then your physical self is sort of in the valley. And, but Yeah, I think we do generate our desires. We can select them. I think we have programmed kind of life themes, but the specifics of it are up to us and free will. That's what I believe at the moment.
Okay. All right. That's fair. I actually have a very strong free will component to my belief system. I honestly don't think that there's any kind of scripting going on except for the scripting that we decided to do, which to me is just another manifestation of free will anyway. So.
Like if there are two components, they're simpatico is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really matter. It's just how you conceive of it.
Right.
Either way, you get what you want. You could say, well, you have a desire to manifest, and maybe you're just psychic and you're tapping into the plan, but it coincides with your happiness either way.
And plus, I think that if you wrote the plan, you can change it.
Exactly. That's right.
It's not written in stone.
That's right. And that's the key to doing this is getting over the victim stance. Realizing that you can do anything, you're powerful. That's kind of scary for some people,
It can be scary, but it can also be, as you say, quite empowering, because the fact that we have been trained, essentially, by our society to believe that we're not powerful, that we should subsume our own beliefs and ideas and thoughts and emotions and feelings and all that kind of stuff to what some authority says or to what our teachers say or what our parents said or anything else. That does lead to us all having to basically climb our way out of this well of doubt and lack of self-confidence. And that's, you're right, that's one of the really great things about this whole LOA concept. It gives us not only a way out, but it encourages us on the way out. That's a nice combination.
Yeah, and there's no need to get tripped up in the fear. Again, that's just criticizing ourselves. Because once we realize we're powerful, then we go, oh shit, I just said something negative, and we get all wrapped up in that. But actually, we've been driving the whole time. We've just been asleep at the wheel. So we're just waking up. So you can really do no wrong. You can only get better from here.
Well, let's see. I think I want to finish this off with a little bit of a quiz. Have you ever seen the series on Bravo called Inside the Actors Studio?
No, but it sounds fun.
Oh, it's basically the Actors Studio in New York. James Lipton, who's one of the founders, leaders of the school, is the host on the show. And they have famous movie stars and theater stars and musicians and so forth come on to talk about their experiences with the various stuff they've done creatively in their lives and what other things are going on in their lives and so on and so forth. It's a very thorough exploration of everything you'd want to know about, Meryl Streep or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have all the students who are theater majors of various kinds. They want to be producers or actors or writers or, whatever in the audience listening. And then at the end of the show, the students get to ask their own questions of the guest. So it's quite good. But at the end of the interview portion, James Lipton asks a quiz. He offers a series of quiz questions that come from a French host, a French TV host, whom he admires very much. The host's name was Bernard Pivot. And so this particular quiz became sort of the, I guess you might say, the quintessential standard of Lipton's show of Inside the Actors Studio, and he uses it as kind of a way to just round the whole thing off. So if you're interested, I'd like to ask you some of the quiz questions that Bernard Pivot would ask of his French audience, or French guests, I should say.
Sure, as long as you don't ask me in French, because my French isn't very good.
my French is terrible, so I'll do it in English. That'll be easier.
Okay, great.
So the first question is, what is your favorite word?
Oh, God, that changes every moment. Let's say fuselage.
Fuselage, okay. And what is your least favorite word?
I don't think I have one.
Okay. Well, you don't have to have one. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Unabated silliness.
And what
in other words,
go ahead.
Self-amusement.
Self-amusement, okay. That's good. What turns you off?
I guess cliche.
Oh, interesting, okay. The next question is probably the most popular one in the quiz and in the survey, and everybody looks forward to it every time he gets to it. But What is your favorite curse word?
I like to make new ones up or take on accents like "dang darn it," you know. You probably hear that in Virginia, don't you?
Oh yeah.
I once heard one that was Christ on toast. You know, just make up expletives as we go. You know.
What sound or noise do you love?
I like the sound of, you know, that canned cranberry sauce that's jelly, and you take it out of the can, it makes that sort of sound.
Oh, that's a cool one. I like that one. What sound?
But I like the sound of big band jazz from the 40s, especially.
Oh, do you? Well, as I mentioned before, yeah, I'm a swing dancer, so I've done a lot of dancing to the 40s big band era.
I know, I'm a swing dancer too.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
How long have you been doing it?
Oh, about 10 years.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I did it for about 10 years straight. Since we moved to Virginia, we aren't really close to any venue nearby to do that, so we've really missed it. But we're hoping to move back to Connecticut and get back into it again. But, yeah.
Excellent.
Now, what sound or noise do you hate?
The classic, you know, fingernails on the chalkboard.
Yeah, that one always got to me, too. That one and of course, I went to school when they actually did use chalk, and they had little chalk holders, those metal chalk holders. I don't know if they even use stuff anymore. But if the chalk broke while they were writing, the metal would scrape along the blackboard, and that's even worse. Awful.
That's rough. Yeah. and you know, just for the record, I don't really get involved in hate. The word doesn't appeal, so I just say I have preferences. You know, I prefer this. I don't prefer that.
I'm just reading the exact survey questions as they were originally written.
Yes.
Now, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I think I have another fantasy parallel reality where I'm a jazz singer, and I've dabbled in that a little bit, but
jazz
still may happen.
That's interesting. You say you've dabbled in it? You've tried it?
Yeah. Yeah, I've taken a lot of voice lessons. I used to perform. I used to have a band and do some, you know, kind of jazz jams, show up and sing a little bit. It's fun.
No kidding. All right. Now, what profession would you not like to attempt?
Probably most of them.
I can relate to that one. For me, going through professions is like, you know, check that one off, no. Check that one off, no. Check one, no. Check one, no. No. The harder part was finding the one that I wanted to do. And then the final question of the survey, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You were here all along.
Aha. Not existential at all, quite spiritual. Well, that's great. Well, Debbianne DeRose, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. This has been quite a lot of fun. And when do you think the new book's going to be done?
Right around the end of the year, and it'll certainly be available for early January for New Year's resolutions for those who intend to manifest in the new year, and they may even get it going before Valentine's Day. Why not?
Okay, all right. And of course, anybody wants to find out what the status is, they can visit your website, Debbianne.com.
That's right, and it'll be available on Amazon like the other book when it's ready. All the usual suspects will have it.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.